You will not put these passengers at risk, not on my watch.
He was a man of power, a leader respected in boardrooms across the country. Yet on that flight, none of it mattered. To the airline staff, he wasn't a CEO. He was just another passenger they thought they could humiliate. What they didn't realize was that within minutes, their mockery would turn into regret. This wasn't just about one seat on a plane. It was about dignity, respect, and a shocking twist no one saw coming. How could a simple flight expose such deep injustice? Marcus Hill had built his life on discipline, vision, and persistence. From humble beginnings, he had risen to become the CEO of a thriving tech company, admired for his brilliance and leadership. That morning, he carried himself with the same quiet confidence he always did. Tailored suit, leather briefcase, and the calm demeanor of a man used to responsibility. To the world outside, he looked like success personified. But inside, Marcus was just a man excited to get home after a week of intense meetings. The airport was buzzing, filled with travelers shuffling through security lines, dragging carry-ons, and rushing to catch flights. Marcus walked with purpose, ticket in hand, heading toward his gate. His seat was booked in first class, a well-earned comfort after long hours of work. For him, it wasn't just luxury. It was necessity. Time in the air was often when he prepared for board meetings or reviewed deals. As he waited to board, a few staff members behind the counter exchanged glances, their smirks almost unnoticeable to most. But Marcus caught the flicker of judgment in their eyes. He brushed it off. He had faced skepticism before. He knew what it meant to walk into spaces where people didn't expect someone like him to belong. Still, there was something unsettling in the air that morning. He didn't know it yet, but this flight would not go as planned. A confrontation was coming, one that would not only test his patience, but reveal the ugly truth still lingering in places where dignity should never be questioned. Boarding began, and Marcus joined the short line for first class. The hum of travelers filled the gate, overhead announcements calling out destinations. As he stepped forward, the flight attendant at the boarding gate looked at his ticket, then at him, pausing a moment too long. Her smile was forced, her tone clipped. "Are you sure this is the right ticket, sir?" she asked, holding it up as if Marcus couldn't possibly know where he belonged. Marcus remained calm, offering a polite nod. "Yes, that's my seat." He was used to being second-guessed, though the sting never fully dulled. She finally scanned the ticket and allowed him through, but her hesitation had already left an echo. Inside the cabin, Marcus placed his briefcase in the overhead bin and settled into his seat. The leather cushions felt familiar. This was the space he had earned, the space he belonged. But before he could breathe easy, another attendant approached. Her tone was sharper, her words laced with suspicion. "Sir, this seat is reserved for first-class passengers. You might be in the wrong section." Marcus produced his ticket again, his patience steady, but the whispers had begun. A couple of nearby passengers exchanged glances, eyebrows raised, smirks tugging at their lips. The assumption was clear. They didn't believe he belonged there. Minutes later, the situation escalated. The attendant returned, this time accompanied by a supervisor. Their voices were low but firm, suggesting he step out and let them recheck the seat assignment. The implication was insulting, yet Marcus complied, standing quietly in the aisle as curious eyes followed his every move. For a man used to commanding boardrooms, standing exposed in judgment was a wound deeper than words. Passengers began murmuring. Some shook their heads in disapproval, not at the airline's behavior, but at Marcus himself, as though his very presence was out of place. A few pulled out phones, recording discreetly, sensing that something unusual was unfolding. The supervisor returned moments later, handing Marcus back his ticket with a rehearsed smile. "It seems everything checks out. You may sit back down." No apology, no acknowledgement of the humiliation he had just endured. He adjusted his jacket, reclaiming his seat with quiet dignity, but inside his patience thinned. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Marcus stared out the window, his thoughts heavy. This wasn't new, being questioned, doubted, dismissed. But it wasn't something he could simply accept. The sting of injustice wasn't just about him. It was about the countless others who faced the same silent mockery every day. The engines roared to life, the plane lifted, and the air grew still. But Marcus had already decided. This time he wouldn't remain silent. What happened next would leave the entire cabin stunned. The cabin had settled into a tense silence. Some passengers buried themselves in magazines, others pretended to sleep. But Marcus sat upright, every sense alert. The humiliation from earlier replayed in his mind, sharper with each recall. This wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a violation of his dignity. And when the pilot himself walked out from the cockpit, motioning toward Marcus, the wound cut deeper. The pilot's voice carried just enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Sir, I'm going to need you to move to economy. There seems to be some confusion." Gasps rippled through the cabin. Marcus held up his ticket once again, his tone calm but unshakable. "There is no confusion. This is my seat." But the pilot, stiff and dismissive, pressed on. The implication was undeniable. In his eyes, Marcus didn't belong. That was the breaking point. Marcus reached into his briefcase and produced a phone. Not for recording, but for a call. With steady composure, he dialed. His voice was measured, professional, but carried the weight of authority. Within minutes, heads began to turn as the plane, just minutes after takeoff, was ordered back to the gate. Confusion spread like wildfire. Whispers filled the cabin. When the aircraft rolled to a halt, airport security and airline executives were already waiting. The announcement stunned passengers. The pilot and crew involved were being removed from duty. Passengers stared, jaws slack, as Marcus stood, gathering his belongings with quiet dignity. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't lashed out. He had simply reminded them, through the power he rightfully held, that respect was not optional. The very people who mocked him now stood in shame, their authority stripped in front of everyone. For Marcus, it wasn't revenge. It was justice, swift and undeniable. And for the passengers who witnessed it, it was a moment they would never forget. As Marcus walked off that plane, the silence of the cabin spoke louder than any applause. Some passengers avoided eye contact, ashamed of their earlier smirks. Others stared in awe, realizing they had witnessed something far bigger than a seating dispute. For Marcus, it wasn't about proving his power. It was about proving a point. Dignity is not negotiable. In the days that followed, word of the incident spread. Passengers who had filmed clips shared them online, sparking a conversation about who gets questioned, who gets doubted, and why. Many saw in Marcus's story their own struggles. The countless moments of being overlooked, dismissed, or judged for nothing more than the color of their skin. Marcus didn't tell his story to seek sympathy. He told it to remind the world of a truth too often ignored. That equality is not something you earn with wealth, status, or titles. It is something every human being is entitled to, simply by existing. What happened on that plane wasn't just about one man standing his ground. It was about exposing a deeper reality. Racism doesn't always wear a uniform or shout in the streets. Sometimes it hides in polite smiles, in quiet assumptions, in the subtle moments where respect is withheld. But when it's challenged, when it's brought into the light, change becomes possible. So, the next time you see someone being treated as though they don't belong, remember Marcus. Remember that silence protects the wrong side of history. And ask yourself, will you turn away or will you stand up? Because in the end, justice isn't just about what happens in boardrooms or airplanes. It's about what happens in all the small, everyday moments that shape who we are. And maybe, just maybe, that's where change truly begins. And as we reflect on Marcus's journey, the truth becomes impossible to ignore. Racism is not just history. It's a wound that still bleeds in the present. His strength turned humiliation into a moment of justice, but the fight for dignity continues far beyond that plane. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Share it. Talk about it. Be part of the change that ensures no one is ever questioned for simply existing. And if you believe these stories matter, join our community by subscribing. Together, we can make sure voices like Marcus's are never silenced again.